Previously, in episode 2 of this home makeover series, I completed a full bathroom renovation. Make sure you check it out if you missed it. But here we are in episode 3, transforming the front entryway.
The living dining space is actually straight off the front door, so as soon as you walk in the front door, you'll be able to see this entire space. However, when you walk into a home, you get an instant first impression of the home and how it makes you feel. In order to try and create a beautiful first impression, we're going to be creating a beautiful front entry here. I'm going to be removing this little section of lino floor and adding a pattern tile. We're then going to create a feature wall here on this wall, which is going to have a 3/4 wall panel and also some hooks and a stunning feature color that we're going to be able to draw people's attention in as soon as they walk into the home.
So let's take another quick look at what the front entry currently looks like. It is such a blank slate and I can't wait to get creative with it. And now let's dive into the makeover. Now the first thing that I did in this front entry makeover was to lay the floor tiles. Now I potentially could have not laid floor tiles in this section and just used the same flooring that I'm going to be using throughout the rest of the house. I'm going to be getting timber planks installed throughout the house, and the easiest option would have just been to use those timber planks in the front entry as well. But I really wanted to make this stand out, and this tiled front entry with this beautiful pattern tile is going to help create a real point of difference in this front entry. After I measured out the levels and got the spacing correct, I mixed up some tile glue and then I was able to start laying these floor tiles. If you watched the bathroom makeover, you'll notice that I used the same tiles here in the front entry floor as I did in the bathroom. I really found that that was just going to bring a little bit of cohesion into a few different spaces, and I'm also going to be using these same tiles in the laundry as well. When you have some more difficult areas to cut or you're trying to cut around your skirting board, you're going to need to scribe out the pattern onto the tile. There's a few different ways of doing this, and the easiest option is to buy a little tool that you can use to get the same shape as the door and then place that onto the tile and just trace it. If you don't have access to that, you're going to need to use your pencil to scribe that out and then make sure you move out the correct distance away from the wall before you do your cut. These tiles are a porcelain tile, and in order to cut them and get these detailed cuts, I needed to use a diamond blade on an angle grinder. When you're doing your cuts, make sure you work in small sections so you don't chip off too much of your tile. That cut fit in perfectly, so I laid down all of that first row, and then once the first row was installed, I was able to then move on to the second row of tiles. This tile glue that I'm using was a rapid set glue, and I did find that it went off very quickly, so I did need to move fairly quickly when I was moving along with these tiles. I would just make sure that I would lay each tile, get it flush and level, put my spacers in, and then move on to the next one. As I got towards the end of laying these floor tiles, I could see how it was starting to turn out, and I really loved the separation that the tiles were creating in the front entry space. Once the tiling was all done, I left it for a day because I needed to make sure that the tiles were dry before I could walk on top of them, and then I came back in to start organising the feature wall and the wood panels. I had to make sure the measurements were correct and that I had the panels divided up evenly so that I would have the same space in between each panel. Then once I was happy with the spacers, I cut a spacer to use in between each one, which you can see here. And then as I applied each panel, I would put some liquid nails on the back of the panel and then use the brad nailer to secure the panel onto the wall. Once you've got the measurements correct, it is super quick to just go along and install all of these panels. I had these panels installed within 30 minutes. After all of the panels were secured and fixed in place, I needed to go along with the no more gaps and fill in all of the edges. I got the silicone tube out and I used the no more gaps to go down each of these on both sides of that timber plank that I've added in, and then I just used some window cleaner and my finger to go along and make sure I got a really nice smooth edge. Getting all of these gaps filled was actually more time consuming than cutting down and applying the panels onto the wall, because I needed to get all of the gaps in all of the joints, so there was 4 in each section, and then all of the nail holes filled as well. While the no more gaps was drying, it was the perfect time to grab the grout out and start to grout the tiles. I'm using a premix grout in a light grey because I don't want to highlight the grout lines too much. You can sometimes, if you want to highlight grout lines, pick a dark colour grout, and that's really going to make those grout lines show up against the tile. But in this instance, I didn't want that, so I just made sure the colour was similar colour to the tiles. To install the grout, I just went along with the grout trowel and pushed the grout into all of these grooves where there is a gap between the tiles. I didn't do up against the wall on either side because I'm going to be putting silicone there. Once you know how to do it, grouting is actually really quite simple. So once you get the tools that you need and you have a go, you'll find that it's not difficult to do. I actually find grouting somewhat therapeutic and enjoy the process. Once you've got the grout in everywhere you needed to get it, you do need to give it probably 20 to 30 minutes just to harden up a little bit before you go back in with your sponge. If you go in too quickly, you'll find that when you're using the sponge to wipe away the excess grout, you might wipe out too much from those lines. So you do need to make sure it has gone a little bit hard before you start wiping off the excess. Now that the grouting's done, I am finished for the day and I have to go and pick my kids up from school, and I'll be coming back tomorrow to continue with this makeover. Here I am the next day. I have come in with my sander and I decided I was just going to start off by sanding off all of the excess of the no more gaps to get nice clean lines across all of those joins where the nail holes were. As I was sanding, I got the fright of my life because the fire alarm went off, and I thought, what in the earth is going on? Why is the fire alarm going off? But then I did a little bit of research and I realized that sanding creates sanding dust, and the sanding dust looks like smoke to the smoke detectors, and so off they went. Maybe you're not like me and you already knew this, but it was definitely a new occurrence for me. However, I do sanding all the time and I'm not sure why it hasn't happened for me yet, but I opened the front door and then continued sanding. While I had the orbital sander going, I thought it was the perfect time to also scuff sand the back of this front door. I'm going to be painting this front door, and in order to get the best adhesion, I needed to do a deep clean and then do a scuff sand of the door. I also did a scuff sand to the front of the door because I'm pretty sure I'm going to paint the other side of the door as well, but I'm not 100% decided on this yet. If I decide not to paint the external side of this door, it doesn't matter that I've done the scuff sand on the door. I'll just apply a clear varnish to the front of the door. I gave everything a brush down with the broom to get rid of any of the sanding dust that was left behind before I started to apply the primer. I'm using the Taubman's 3-in-1 Prep Primer, and I'm just going to paint a coat of that onto the back of this door. Next up, it was time to paint my wood panels and the bottom half of this feature wall. I'm just coming in with the white paint and I'm going to paint on the first coat here. Because I bought pre-primed timber and the wall had also previously been painted, I didn't need to put a primer on here. I could go straight in with my semi-gloss paint. I've done 2 coats of paint on the bottom half of the wall, but because this is a white paint, I am going to need to do a 3rd coat just to make sure that I get a nice solid coverage. But in the meantime, let's paint the top half of the wall. I wanted to use a dark colour on the top half of the wall so that the white had a dramatic look and you could see the difference between the top half and the bottom half, but I didn't want to go too dark because the rooms are not huge rooms and I just wanted to try and keep that big, warm, open feel about the space.
The front entry is starting to come together really nicely. I did change it a little bit from what my original plans were, mainly just here with the colour that I've chose to use on the top half of this wall and also the panelling, because I didn't originally plan to have white as this panelling. But once I put the panels on the wall, I really liked the vibe that I was getting by that really light and bright space. The first thing you do when you walk in the front door is you want the home to feel really inviting. And once I put these panels on, the white was really just helping this pop. So I decided to paint all of the panel white just to give that really light, bright feel in this room. I then decided to paint the top half of the wall the same color as the feature wall on the other half of the dining room. Now, the reason I decided to do this was to create a bit more cohesion between these spaces because it is all one room and it is not a huge space. So this way we're creating a little bit more cohesion and keeping the room tied in together. The tiles have come up brilliantly and we have done the tiling there. All the grouting's been done. It's obviously very dirty because we've been walking in and out of the house constantly, so that will all need to be cleaned. But the only thing I do need to do with the tiling is to put the silicone along the edge between the skirting boards and the tiles. So I need to fill all of that with silicone. The rest of the flooring is going in about 2 weeks' time, so that's really just going to elevate this space once the rest of the flooring goes in as well. The only things that I've got left to do here in this front entry is add a few hooks. I am going to paint one more coat on this white paint just because white paint is a little bit tricky to get that nice solid coverage with. Paint one more coat on the white and then I'm going to add 3 hooks here. I need to be careful that the hooks are not going to come as far as where the door opens to. I want to make sure that they're a fair way away from that so that somebody's not going to walk in through the door and then crash into one of those hooks. So I've got those 3 hooks that I'm going to install there. We're going to add some staging elements on those hooks and a little bench that's going to go along here when we stage the house. The front door still hasn't been painted. All that's been done is primed at this stage. And the front door is going to be painted green, the same color as the master bedroom feature wall. So I'm almost finished in this front entryway, but it is looking spectacular and I can't wait to see how it turns out and the end result.
Let's get to painting the back of the door green. I'm so in love with green at the moment and I've used green a lot in my home as well as this home renovation that I'm working on. Green is just such a soothing colour. It's got that Titan nature and it's great for reducing stress and boosting your mood. I also think green is suitable for most people, and because I'm going to be selling this house, I wanted to try and keep it a way that most people would be able to appreciate the home, but still have it as a little bit of a point of difference and not your cookie cutter builder grade home. I did all of the caulking and added the silicone in along the walls on both sides of the tiles. I just used the silicone gun to run that along the edge and then use my finger to smooth that off nicely. I Really great tip when you're doing caulking is to make sure you use window cleaner to spray your finger so that the silicone then doesn't stick to your finger as you're dragging your finger along to smooth out that edge. If you've got the window cleaner on your finger, it's going to make sure that that doesn't stick. I then painted on the second coat of green to the back of the door. I just used the paintbrush to cut in all around the door handle and then all around the edges of the door, and then I used the roller to go along and roll all of the inside of the door. The last thing I needed to do was install these hooks. I worked out where I wanted the hooks to go and then just marked that with my drill, moved the hook out of the way and then pre-drilled the holes where the screws were going to go. I then held the hook in position and just screwed those screws into the wall. Then I just repeated the process the same twice again for the other two hooks. Now that that's all done, it is time to add the furniture and the staging elements so that I can show you the complete end result. When you're staging a space, you can have a play around with different elements. I swapped out a couple of different plants, a couple of different cushions. I swapped around what I was going to have on the hooks until I decided that this is what I was happy with. Let's take another quick look at the space before we did anything and what it looks like now. I love how it turned out, and it is such a statement as you walk into this home. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and make sure you subscribe because up next I am going to share with you a stunning kitchen transformation where I am going to DIY this kitchen and turn it into the kitchen of your dreams. This is going to be my favorite room of the entire house, and it's going to be one you don't want to miss, so I'll see you next week.